Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love, an everlasting love, an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness have I drawn you, drawn you, drawn you.
Hello, we're recording. Hello, people.
Does this dress make me look fat? That is what's called a double-barreled question. So if a wife asks that to a husband, what is he supposed to say that isn't going to incriminate him, whether he says yes or no? And so we're going to talk about some other logical fallacies, and particularly the double-barreled question. And a scripture that God gave me for this is in James 1:8, where it says, "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." We had been talking about logical fallacies last time, and mostly talked about the red herring fallacy. Today we want to cover what is sometimes called the complex question fallacy, or trick question, multiple question, or fallacy of presupposition. For example, is Mary wearing a blue or red dress? It restricts the possible responses to a blue or red dress, when in fact Mary might be wearing a different colored dress, or trousers, or a skirt. When a complex question contains controversial presuppositions, it is known as a loaded question. For example, a classic loaded question containing incriminating assumptions that the questioned person seems to admit to if they answer the question instead of challenging them is, "Have you stopped beating your wife?" Whether the person answers yes or no, they imply that they have previously beaten their wife. A loaded question may be asked to trick the respondent into admitting something the questioner believes to be true. A similar fallacy is the double-barreled question. It is asked when someone asks a question that touches upon more than one issue, yet allows for only one answer. People tried to trick Jesus by asking these types of questions. So I'm going to give an example of three of them. They did it a lot, and there are references to that throughout the Gospels, but I chose to read some of them that are right near the same place in Matthew. And so first one I'm going to read is in Matthew chapter 21, verses 23 through 27. And when he was come into the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, and said, "By what authority dost thou..." Wait, am I in the right? Yeah, I'm in the right place. Okay. "By what authority dost thou do these things, and who gave thee this authority?" And Jesus answered and said unto them, "I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I in like wise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, whence was it, from heaven or of men?" And they reasoned with themselves, saying, "If we shall say from heaven, he will say unto us, why did ye not then believe him? But if we say of men, we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. And they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. And he said unto them, neither tell I you by what authority I do these things.
I love that because they were trying to ask him a trick question, and then he asked them a question that had them...
They couldn't answer without getting in trouble. So he turned it around on them.
Right.
Okay, and then the next one is in Matthew chapter 22, 15 through 22. Okay. Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent out unto him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true, and teachest the way of God in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men. Tell us, therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him a penny. And he saith unto them, whose is this image and inscription? They say unto him, Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. When they had heard these words, they marveled and left him and went their way. Okay, and then the third one I wrote down is also in Matthew 22. And it's not long right after the one I just read, where in verses 23 through 28, but then Jesus answers them in verses 29 through 33. So, okay, let's see here. Okay. The same day came to him the Sadducees, which say there is no resurrection, and asked him, saying, Master, Moses said, if a man die, having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up seed unto his brother. Now there were with us 7 brethren, and the first, when he had married a wife, deceased, and having no issue, left his wife unto his brother. Likewise the second also, and the third unto the 7th. And last of all the woman died also. Therefore in the resurrection whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all had her. Jesus answered and said unto them, Ye do err, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have ye not read that which was spoken unto you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitude heard this, they were astonished at his doctrine. So, but when the Pharisees had heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together, and then they tried to come up with another thing, because the Sadducees were the ones that didn't believe in a resurrection. Yeah. So they were trying to prove there was no resurrection by asking Jesus a question like that. Well, how in the world would she be one of their wives? in the resurrection to try to disprove the resurrection. So then the Pharisees said, well, they got silent, so now let's try. So they tried more tricks like that.
Yeah, well, what I love about this is that, see, Jesus knew what they were doing here. He knew that it was like a trap where they were trying to point out the absurdity of the resurrection based on this idea of either these 7 different men had all been married to this one woman. Like, whose wife is she? And first of all, that's not a very good argument against there being a resurrection, just because that's an absurd situation. And what basically it was a loaded question because it's assuming so much. It assumes that there even is such a thing as marriage in heaven. And what it actually means there, but they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels. There's many things that could mean. Like, obviously more information is needed. But what it says, they never marry nor are given in marriage. For one thing, this idea that you were just giving this person to marry, like, oh well, you take this one, you marry her, like,
that's the way they did.
That's the way they did things back then. And so, first of all, women are not just property to be passed from one person to another in heaven. But also, I personally believe that they won't be having sex with people in heaven anyway. That's what I tend to believe, because people who know how I am anyway. But so I just love this part. But the fact is, they asked this question, but Jesus knew that it was really just to get him to talk about the resurrection, which they didn't believe in. So the question wasn't even asked as a serious question. It wasn't them genuinely wanting to know something. It was just about trying to get him to say something. And
then Jesus said, "You err, not knowing the Scriptures nor the power of God." So he just basically shut him up.
Yeah.
But then this was the pattern that was going on, where people were trying to use these trick questions to get him to look like he's saying something that he wasn't. Yeah. So they were giving him these double-barreled questions.
And it reminds me, I had this one professor with Full Sail, my esports production professor, and he would always say there are no stupid questions. I proved him wrong, and I asked plenty of stupid questions. Because they're contrary to what some people say, there are stupid questions. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, a lot of why we're leading into this subject is because there is an amendment that Missouri is trying to pass for people to vote on, which is a double-barreled amendment to vote on. So, we're going to have Chastity explain about that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get a drink of water so I don't cough the whole time.
Yeah. Okay. So I had written a post with my opinion on this, but what I'm just going to do is I'm going to just read the statement on the amendment straight from the website. It was called Ballotpedia, where I read this, and it explains about what the amendment is and what a yes and a no vote does. So, Missouri Amendment 3, the Prohibit Abortion and Gender Transition Procedures for Minors Amendment, is on the ballot in Missouri as a legislatively referred constitutional amendment on November 3rd, 2026. A yes vote supports amending the Missouri Constitution to repeal the right to reproductive freedom, which voters ratified in 2024. Prohibit abortions except in cases of medical emergency, fetal anomaly, rape, or incest, and permit abortions in cases of rape or incest only through 12 weeks of gestation. Prohibit gender transition surgeries for minors, as well as the prescription or administration of cross-sex hormones or puberty-blocking drugs to minors, with an exception for treatments unrelated to the purpose of gender transition, and make other changes. A no vote opposes the amending the Missouri Constitution, keeping the existing constitutional right to reproductive freedom and not adding provisions that prohibit abortion and gender transition surgeries and procedures. Now, I wrote a long post about what all the different points and what's wrong with them, but I wanted to try to, for the purpose of this podcast, I want to keep it brief. Basically, the first thing when I found out about this amendment that made me very sad is they're trying to mix abortion with gender-affirming care. And these are two completely separate issues. That's why this is a double-barreled amendment. Because people who are against abortion or for or against abortion, they may not have an opinion on the gender transition, whether it's for minors or adults. And by trying to load this question where you can only answer yes or no, and so if you want to ban abortion, you also have to ban this gender-affirming care, and that can mean a lot of different things. Or what if somebody's the opposite of me, and they want to ban gender-affirming care, but they don't want to ban abortion? Well, this amendment doesn't serve them as well, because they're two separate issues. They should be two separate amendments.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is each one of these topics, the abortion topic is a separate issue, and that can be discussed. And I want to call attention specifically to the part about abortion in this amendment, though. On point number 2 under a yes vote, it says, prohibit abortion except in cases of medical emergency, fetal anomaly, rape, or incest, and permit abortions in cases of rape or incest only through 12 weeks of gestation. Just that section right there. There's a lot in there. And because they've loaded this question so much and mixed in the gender-affirming care, that itself is a red herring because they're trying to distract from what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, prohibit abortions except in cases of medical emergency. Now, an example of a medical emergency is ectopic pregnancy, where there's no chance for the baby to survive. And so, yes, they have to remove it then, but that means it doesn't implant into the uterus and the pregnancy wouldn't continue anyway, but it would kill the woman if they don't treat that. So, yes, I agree in that case, but that's not really the same as an abortion. But some people try to make it sound like it's the same, and it's really not. But, of course, they have to act to save the mother's life in that case.
Right.
And the fetal anomaly, that can include anything. So if your baby might have Down syndrome or autism or it might be intersex, basically if it's abnormal in any way, what they think is not normal or the way it should be, oh well, let's kill this baby because it's going to be different, so let's kill it. And that allows for all kinds of discrimination, And then when they bring up the rape or incest, like we've talked about before, why should the baby be killed because its father raped its mother? It's not the baby's fault, and we've talked about that before. And so, what they're doing is they're bringing rape into it, and rape is a very emotionally charged topic too.
Yes.
So they're trying to get people emotionally messed up with this, and then incest is a whole nother topic too. But I still don't see why they would specifically try to allow in the case of incest. But aside from that, here's what is strange. Permit abortions in cases of rape or incest only through 12 weeks of gestation. And that's what I find weird, because if you are saying that it's acceptable to kill somebody because their father was a rapist, then why cut it off at 12 weeks? What I'm saying is, if they're going to use that kind of justification to kill it, then why does it matter if somebody is 12 weeks or 12 years old? Oh, your father was a rapist, you deserve to die. So that right there doesn't even make sense with these exceptions. So just that part about a yes vote, I feel like as a pro-life person, I can't vote yes on this amendment just because I would be saying, oh, it's okay to kill them if they're the product of rape or incest, or if they're abnormal. And that could include even people like me. I'm very abnormal.
In more ways than one.
Absolutely. And I don't like and they can genetically detect. They can detect people who have genetic disorders of intersex or Down syndrome, autism, Klinefelter syndrome, which I probably do have.
Well, that's a type of intersex condition.
Yes, that is a type. and they can genetically detect all these so-called abnormalities of development that the children may be different, and to use that as an excuse to kill them, like, oh, they're not going to be what we want them to be, so let's kill them, and that leads to, oh, well, let's kill people already born and adults, like, oh, this person's mentally disabled, so let's kill them, and that's that same murderous mindset, and I feel like if I'm going to vote yes on a pro-life amendment, it's not going to be this one, because it's saying it's okay to kill people who are abnormal, who are the product of rape or incest. And so they've loaded all these different things in there, and they're trying to justify some abortions while trying to ban others. And so that's like a double-minded man and stable in all his ways who wrote this amendment right there.
Yeah.
But then just the other part about prohibiting gender transition surgeries for minors, as well as their prescription or administration of cross-sex hormones.
That's a whole different issue.
It's a very different issue. And the thing is, people who are voting on this, most people, unless they are transgender themselves or they have a family member that is transgender, they're not going to know what a surgery or what the hormones are even for. Most people are very ignorant on this topic.
Right.
And the thing is, I personally would not vote for it based on that either, because I think that's a decision of the children and the parents and the doctors to all discuss, along with their insurance company, to come to an agreement on what is done in these cases. I don't want a blanket ban on all of it. And
Right. Because for one thing, when it comes to the hormones, we've already found out how necessary it is for you. And it depends on what type of surgeries we're talking about, too. There can be a lot of problems with some of these surgeries that they try to do. But in the case of what Chastity went through, that was medically necessary for her to have her testicles removed. And so if that's part of it, that's a whole different thing right there. Whereas some of the things that are done, I wouldn't think first of all, wouldn't be necessary and could be dangerous too. But it has to be decided, like Chastity said, with the doctor, with the patient, with the parents. And so it's a very delicate situation when it comes to minors. Now, when someone becomes an adult, they're more informed on what's going on with themselves and what they're needing for different reasons. So, but still, again, they need to have counsel over it.
Yeah, and see, that's just the thing about it, is that there's some surgeries and treatments that I don't think should be done, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to vote to ban that just as part of an amendment, because
when you don't know each situation either.
Right. You know, I feel like another key difference between the whole transgender stuff and the abortion thing is, abortion is a topic that everyone can have an opinion on. And I say that because all of us once were a fetus or a baby, however you put it. And
fetus means baby.
Yeah, it's
even if they say it's not a baby, it's a fetus.
It's the Latin word for child.
Yeah, so that's what a fetus is.
Yeah, some people don't know that, but that happens to be the fact there.
Yeah.
But everybody can have an opinion on abortion, because this is a question about under what circumstances you believe it's acceptable to kill somebody. And many people like myself don't believe that we should be killing the innocent. Babies have done no wrong. They don't deserve to die. And if their father raped their mother, then maybe the father deserves to die, but the baby doesn't. You know, so that's a whole debate in and of itself.
Yeah, and we've talked about if the mother for some reason isn't able to raise that child.
Yeah.
They can always give it up for adoption, and many times there are very loving parents that would love to have that child and raise it. They aren't going to hold it against them.
Yeah.
You know, about the rape or anything like. Now, sometimes mothers don't want to raise them because it reminds them of that rape, I personally think that they could get therapy and overcome that bad memory without having to give up the child. But if they need to give it up and they feel they need to do it, there's no reason to have to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's definitely a whole different issue than this transgender stuff. And yet they're lumping it all together and tricking people into answering a yes or no, voting yes or no about the whole thing.
Right. Aside from the fact that two issues should not be merged into one amendment, the simple fact is, while abortion is something everybody is allowed to have an opinion on, not everybody is educated when it comes to gender transition stuff, because
right. They don't know what they're voting on.
Because usually, if you are transgender yourself, or you or for example, you have a transgender baby that is me, so you are more familiar with this stuff because you talk to me.
Yeah.
But a lot of people.
Now, I didn't know you were transgender.
Mm-hmm.
Before you were born. I didn't know anything about it, but I still wouldn't have aborted you over it.
Right, because you're not that kind of murderous person. I appreciate that, Mom. But the point is, I feel like if somebody is going to vote on something, they kind of have to be informed. And what this does is this brings people to be voting against something when they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of these laws
really not right.
that people are trying to pass, these amendments, they're trying to take advantage of people's ignorance who won't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's very strange too, because they're loading the gender transition, and then they're also loading into it about, what with minors, and people have different opinions on what a child should be allowed to do, what an adult should be allowed to do, but even that is a separate issue from the topic of what gender transition surgery itself, and then the safety of different procedures. Some things are safer, some things are good, some things are bad. Maybe some things should be banned and other things should not. Unfortunately, it's just like, let's just ban it all,
Yeah.
So that's why I feel like this amendment is the same type of double-barreled question is, does this dress make me look fat? Because the reason, people have heard this question before, of does this dress make me look fat? And let me explain for those of you who don't understand why that's a bad question. Because if you answer yes, the dress makes you look fat, then she gets mad at you.
Because you're telling her she looks fat.
But if you tell her no, then the implied message is, no, it's not the dress. You're just fat.
It's not the dress. You're
just really fat. So basically, remember now, Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. But Jesus probably should have said, also, don't ask people a stupid question that can't be answered with a yes or a no. Some questions you can't answer yes or no.
Yeah.
Just like, is Mary wearing a red or blue dress? What about purple, yellow, green, black? No, there's other colors. And also, my favorite double-barreled question of all, are you a man or a woman? And I got it. So
people ask you that, don't they?
They do ask me that, and I just tell them, well, you see, my father was a man, and my mother was a woman, and I'm half and half. I'm a hybrid. And so, you ask a silly question, you get a silly answer. Because you can't answer that with simply male or female.
In that case, we're all hybrids.
I know.
If it's based on your father being a man and your mother being a woman.
Yeah, we're all crossbreeds.
In a way, I guess. But yeah, so what I'm wondering, though, is what can we do about these kind of way these amendments are worded? Is there any way to get people to change the way that question is asked before it gets voted on?
That would be what I would recommend. Now, I don't really know how to do that, but I really think that if there is a way to find out who wrote this and contact them and say, look, this amendment needs to be split into two separate amendments.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to try to do research and find out where that's coming from before it gets out there And traps people into saying things they don't mean to say, and can affect so many lives.
Right, because people are supposed to vote on this November 3rd of this year, but today is February 14th, which interestingly is Valentine's Day. It just so happens to be, which is not what we're talking about, but just...
Well, except for the fact that this is God's everlasting love.
Yeah, everlasting love.
But He loves us on Valentine's Day and every other day.
Right,
too.
yeah, so happy Valentine's Day, everyone. But we don't love you all romantically. We just love you with the love of God. So how about that?
I'm so glad you clarified that.
Right, no. Yeah.
Especially since we don't even know most of you out there that are watching us.
Yeah, I can't love people I don't know, just like people can't vote on amendments they don't understand.
Okay. Well, yeah, so that might be something that people can, try to find out how we can object to the way that thing is worded before it gets out there.
Yeah.
But that's something to discern and to watch out for when these kind of questions come up.
Yeah.
And to make sure that we're not trapped into saying something we don't want to say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about it, is that trying to mix these separate topics and ask questions that involve more than one thing, it's a dishonest trick. It's designed to get people to say things that are not true. Either way, it's not true. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when I was doing research on this, like double-barrel questions like that, people are allowed in court to refuse to answer these questions.
Yes.
Because lawyers will ask people questions that are loaded like this so that if the person answers yes or no, they're admitting guilt to something they didn't do.
Right. And so when I've seen court scenes where, and they'll call it a loaded question or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they'll refuse, someone will object to that because it's on grounds that it could incriminate the person.
Yeah, kind of like, have you stopped beating your wife? That's an example.
That's assuming they were ever a wife beater.
Right. For example, or like, on the day that you murdered this person, did you drink your morning coffee? See, that...
Yes, no, yes, no.
Because
yes,
here's
no.
the thing, is because if they answer yes, that they drank coffee...
They're saying they murdered that person.
Right, but if they answer no, and they did drink their coffee, they're saying no, they didn't murder a person, but they did drink their coffee that morning.
Yeah.
So either way, they're lying. So basically, when you force people to lie by either saying yes or no, you are in fact the liar because you're asking a question that is a lie.
Yeah, and what does the coffee have to do with murdering the person?
Well, usually, Mom, how it works is you don't have your coffee in the morning, and that's why you get cranky and murder someone. Usually that's how it goes.
Oh, really? Now, I've heard it connected with alcohol. If somebody goes out of their mind, does a crime because they're under the influence of alcohol.
Right.
But I hadn't heard that about coffee yet, but it's true. Sometimes people get pretty cranky without their caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah. Or for example, sometimes there might be a perceived connection where there isn't. For example, do you want to rob a bank and order pizza? Now, a person might want to order pizza, but they may not want to rob a bank.
Yes.
But see, the person who asked the question might be thinking, well, we can't afford to order pizza, so we have to rob the bank to order pizza. But that's actually a really bad idea.
You think?
Yeah. Not the pizza, the going and robbing a bank. That's the bad part, just to clarify.
Yeah, robbing the bank in order to have the money to order the pizza.
And now that's the sad state of the economy, that people feel like they have to go hold old people and rob a bank in order to order pizza.
Uh-huh.
It's sad that we live in that kind
And
of
then
world.
there was another one you came up with when we were talking about this, was, would you like to sing and murder your grandmother?
Yeah.
Now, unless you have a really bad voice, that's going to automatically murder the grandmother if you sing.
Right. Now,
Then that's kind of not a very good choice there.
Right, but yeah, some people might be able to murder their grandmother by singing at them. Or, that's true. But Some people might like to sing, but they don't necessarily want to murder their grandmother. But that's just what happens because their singing is so bad.
So you don't want to say yes or no to any of that.
Right.
You need to be specific. Yes, I want to sing, but I don't want to murder my grandmother.
Yeah.
Or some people might say just the opposite. If they really don't like their grandmother, that's kind of sad.
And another thing is, sometimes there's a question that's not a double-barrel question, but it's nonetheless a complex question. When someone asks, do you believe in God? That in itself really is a loaded question, because which God, of which religion, or maybe a God that's not in any of the organized religions that people know about. And so there are questions that are complex because they can't be answered briefly. Because, somebody can't just, ask somebody, where do babies come from? And they just say yes or no. Some things you can't answer with a yes or no because it's a deep topic and you have to educate people and it takes hours to explain.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if Chastity ever got an understanding about where babies to come from. Although I think she's got a pretty good idea.
I've heard the legends. Yeah.
I mean, I tried to explain the birds and the bees to all my children, and this one is like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. But see, here's the thing is, a person can be against murdering the babies regardless of where those babies came from.
True. Okay, well, now we've gone around and around till we came right back where we started, haven't we?
I know, right?
Okay. Well, let's not turn this podcast into a trick podcast. So I think we've made our point, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we've made our point. Let's see. Was there anything else? Were there any more scriptures we needed to share? Or, because I just feel like,
Maybe something else will come to your mind.
Yeah.
Because if anybody has any more questions or comments, make sure you put them down, because then we can clarify things even more at another podcast if we get any of your questions or comments about this issue or any of the other issues that we've brought up.
Yeah. Oh, and also another thing that I want to point out too is that I was made aware of this Missouri Amendment 3 because I was asked to make a statement on it as part of the Rainbow Pro-Life Alliance. They asked me to do that. But that's how I know about it, and it happens to be in Missouri. However, even if you're not in Missouri, the point is these kinds of questions should not be on amendments in any state, because they need to keep them as separate issues as separate amendments, because what they're doing is they're confusing voters and they're tricking people into voting for things that they don't want to vote for, and that's not democracy. That's not a fair system at all. Which in many ways the system is not fair, but I just think
that's just plain evil.
Yeah. And so
trying to trick people into things like that.
And I felt like this would be a good topic because the point isn't about where the amendment is. The point also is not what your opinion on abortion or gender affirming care is. Not even the issue. That's what this amendment's about. But it's about that kind of thing. These kinds of loaded questions should not be used because they're dishonest and they're trickery, and that's all they are. So I just wanted to clarify that don't confuse the topic of the amendment with the point we're trying to make, because it's really about the point we're making about these double-barrel questions.
Right. And it all goes back to honesty, like we were talking about last time.
Yeah.
So, do you feel like we've accomplished what we need to do here today?
I think we did.
Okay.
So yes, please leave us your questions and comments, as long as they're not double-barrel questions.
Or triple-barreled or anything else. There is such a thing as triple-barreled. Some people make it as complex as they possibly can.
Yeah, because if they start asking us double-barrel questions, I will probably have to ask them questions
like
that they
Jesus
can't.
did.
Yeah, just like Jesus. Because that is what Jesus would do. If you ask Jesus a stupid question, he will ask you a stupid question that you can't answer. So,
Answer a question with a question. That's what he did, and it shut him up.
yeah, that is the correct Christian response.
Okay.
Goodbye, everybody.
Yes,